I just wasn't being the man that I wanted to be. I wasn't authentic to myself. I wasn't living the life that I wanted to live. I was living the life that other people wanted me to live, that I thought other people wanted me to live, and that society is teaching people how to live, because we're all meant to say, be successful, have a great paying job or entrepreneur, have this big house, drive fancy vehicles, right? And look a certain way, dress a certain way, and be a certain way. And I had literally lost myself as a man, as a person, as a human being. I lost my identity, you could say.
My name is Curt Mercadante, and I'm a speaker, trainer, and disruptive entrepreneur whose mission is to save the world by helping individuals fight for lives of freedom and fulfillment. This show is about helping you create that lifestyle, bringing you interviews with individuals who are disrupting society in a way that empowers you to live that lifestyle of freedom as well. This is the Freedom Club Podcast, and we're grateful you're here. And welcome to the Freedom Club Podcast. I'm your host, Curt Mercadante. Thank you so much for being here today. And before we get into this, I want to let you know that today's episode is brought to you by my very own Productivity Superhero Accelerator. If you're someone who's sick and tired of being sick and tired, of feeling overwhelmed and frustrated and busy, but not truly productive, then the Productivity Superhero Accelerator is for you. Go to curtmercadante.com, click on the Accelerators tab, go and apply for the Productivity Superhero Accelerator, because it's time to be truly productive, not just busy. Now, I'm excited to introduce today's guest. His name is Purdeep Sangha. I'm excited because his journey, his story is somewhat similar to mine in that he was in a very high-profile, well-paying, but high-anxiety corporate job. But you know what? It was having a very negative impact on his mental health, his physical health, and his relationships with his wife, with his kids. And so he got the hell out. And now he works with, through his coaching company and his podcast, male entrepreneurs. That's the name of his company and his podcast, The Male Entrepreneur. We talk about the unique challenges facing male entrepreneurs. We talk about identity. We dip into psychology. We talk about his journey, all that and more on today's episode. Here's my interview with Purdeep Sangha. Thanks so much for coming on the show today, Purdeep.
Hey man, thanks for having me, Curt. I totally appreciate it.
Yeah, we were a common acquaintance connected us. We had a call last week. I love what you're doing. There's a lot of, I hate the word synergies, but there's a lot of alignment, let's say that, between what you're doing and kind of my philosophy and where we're going, which is great. And so happy to have you on the show.
Yeah, it's great to be here.
So, Purdeep, you are, right now, your company is The Male Entrepreneur. Your podcast is The Male Entrepreneur. Want to talk about the road, about both those, your company and your podcast, your road to getting there. Mm-hmm. But the first question, it's a question I always ask, unless I forget, and I have to remind myself. But the question I ask every guest is, this is the Freedom Club Podcast. What does the word freedom mean to you?
Oh, I got a simple one for that one, because it's something that I talk to my clients about and the people I talk. It's really being able to do what you want when you want. And I think so many people take that for granted. I know we in North America take that for granted quite a bit. A lot of people don't have the freedom to do what they want when they want. So that simple, that for me is just simply the definition, being able to get up, go anywhere you want, do whatever you want, spend time with your family, eat the meal that you want, and just live life.
It's interesting because, a lot of people, you say that, and then, I will post something similar to that on LinkedIn as I post. And invariably there are people who come out and say, oh, no, that's me. That's the me generation talking. And, but doing whatever you want doesn't necessarily mean, you resort to hedonism and you're hurting other people. Mm-hmm. Right? There's a sense of individualism, I think, that in our society, going back a century, right? People have been taught to feel guilty sometimes about that, which is why you and I come to train those people in their 30s, 40s, and 50s. It's like, listen, it's okay to have a sense of self, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm glad you brought that up, the caveat, not hurting others. I think that's the one thing to add in there is do things that actually benefit not only yourself but others. But you're absolutely right. I think most people do. It's a weird dynamic, because we're taught to be individuals, especially in North America. In European cultures, it's Asian cultures, it's even a little bit more different. They're taught to be more of a unit, but we're taught to be individuals. Yet it's kind of bad to go for what we want, right? It's almost selfish to go for what we want. And I think I'm a firm believer, and I'm a very spiritual person. I believe in the universe. I believe that we're put on this earth for two reasons. One is to enjoy life, to live it to the fullest. And the second is to help people. I think it's important to realize that if we don't get what we want in life, it's hard to give other people what they need. It's hard to be energized, because if we're continuing to give, you get burned out. And I think people know that as mothers, as fathers, as entrepreneurs, as professionals. If you're continuing to give and you're not recharging, yet there's only so much you can give.
Yeah. And it's interesting because that dynamic you mentioned in terms of we're taught to be individuals, but at the same time taught to feel guilty. Ayn Rand writes about this, in The Fountainhead and in Atlas Shrugged, in terms of, entrepreneurs, and you work with entrepreneurs, are creating things that may, in fact, change the world. Mm-hmm. But people don't think of them as, society writ large, I mean, some people do, don't think of them as helping society. Often it's, how much are they making? What kind of house do they live in? And they're held up versus someone else who maybe didn't create anything, but gives some money to charity. And I'm not saying either is more noble than the other, but that's kind of the point, right? It's there's creators. As an entrepreneur, as you risk things. You risk your ideas. You risk your money. You risk, you may leave a job, and you had a career shift, and it's a risk, right? My daughter, I used to have an agency, and we have a house. We have 2.5 acres. We're on water. And it's funny. We actually paid less for that than we paid for the postage stamp in Illinois, where the taxes are high, but we have a nice house. My daughter is constantly, it's almost as an insult, other kids saying, well, you're rich. You're just rich, almost as an insult. And she doesn't know what to say to them. And first of all, I told her, I said, we're not rich. Secondly, thank them and say, yeah, my dad risked a lot, and that's where we are. But it's that you put it perfectly. We're taught to be individuals. We're taught to go for it. But then when people are individuals, they're made to feel guilty. Feel guilty,
yeah. And it's interesting. I had that mentality too. My parents kind of taught me both. And I was confused because my parents it's funny. My parents used to say, money doesn't grow on trees. Interestingly enough, we had a family orchard. So we do apples and cherries. And I used to laugh at them. And this is where I got the beats a little bit, where I'd be like, no, mom and dad, look outside. Money does grow on trees for us, right? Literally. So it's really in our upbringing, and it's how we're taught. And I don't think there's anything wrong. But I will say, having money is great, but it's what we do with the money that's the more important thing, right? And I think there's a few bad apples out there that just generally, and the media jumps on it, and everybody jumps on it, because you have a few bad apples that have a ton of money and they're just hoarding it and they're not doing anything with it. But there's a ton of philanthropy that's happening as well. There's a ton of people that are wealthy that are contributing to the people that don't have enough to survive in life. So it's an interesting dynamic. I don't know what to say, Curt, because, with the media and with all the stuff that's happening, it's like, what is reality out there? The best thing that we can do, I think, as entrepreneurs and people is really just have an influence on our immediate family and our communities at whole, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Absolutely. I interviewed an individual yesterday, Michael Strong, and he has created a growing network of schools called the Academy of Thought and Industry. And it's a totally alternative school that hopefully someday may not be alternative, but it's not this kind of set curriculum conformity, sit down for an hour. You're actually making things. There were people actually that are forming companies out of it, and it's based on entrepreneurship. And it's interesting because education can be a very, here in the US especially, I don't know if it's the same in Canada, but it becomes a hot topic politically because of the teachers unions and other thing and the money that goes into it. And it's interesting because he talked about as he's building this school, some of the people who are most interested in it, and probably investors and other things. It's Silicon Valley, Austin, Texas. It's the entrepreneurial model. And a lot of these folks on a lot of other issues are totally not aligned with other people who would be aligned on this one issue, entrepreneurship. And he talked about transpartisanship, which is this kind of let the people who want to be ugly meaning, politically and angry and all that, let them do that. Let's be entrepreneurs and let's just get stuff done. Like you said, for ourselves, for our families, for our communities. And I think that's the beauty of entrepreneurship. Ignore what's going on in DC or we're in Ottawa, and get stuff done. So let's, I want to talk about the podcast. I want to talk about your current company. How did you get to, you're wearing the male entrepreneur shirt. How did you get to this point? You weren't always a coach and a trainer and a podcaster.
No. I was an executive at one point, and because my parents, they were entrepreneurs, but they also had a tough time too, because they came here from India with nothing, and they worked for minimum wage for a long number of years before they became entrepreneurs themselves. And they basically taught me, they said, get an education. And so just like any typical Indian immigrant family at that time, they were like, be a doctor, engineer, or lawyer. So I was being kind of groomed into the doctor avenue, and it just so happened I was good at academics, and I was going through that path. And I've been to a lot of schools and universities and business schools, and I landed into that wasn't for me. I actually switched over into finance and business and went down a completely different path. And then I ended up in the corporate world. And I was an executive for a long number of years, and I was a successful executive. On paper, I had it all, you could say. I was making great money. Had great access to events. I could take people out for dinners, go traveling, all expenses paid. But I just wasn't happy. I was not happy at all, because I knew that there was always a ceiling, that I can only go so far, that the work that I was putting in, because I was not working, I would say, a lot harder than all the other executives, but I was definitely making a massive impact. And I just knew that this wasn't going to be rewarded in the way that I wanted to. And it was also impacting. So I would sit around the executive table and we would have conversations. And I just quickly noticed that people just weren't open. There was a lot of self-interests happening, even though people talked about the values of the corporation. And we are here, and especially in the industry that we were in, which was in banking, we talked a lot about the end consumer and the client, but we didn't really show it. And there were a lot of decisions that were being made that I said, no, there's people that are talking behind each other's backs on this. And that's the one thing that really bugs me is the corporate politics, because I believe in order to have an effective company, you have to have everybody in line, and back talking is not effective at all, and backdooring. So I literally just walked into work and I quit. I was done. And another, I would say, an accelerator for that was my wife and I were having some serious challenges. We were at the verge of divorce. We were considering divorce. We hadn't signed the papers. We had a young child at that time, but we were just having a tough time. And I wasn't being the man that I wanted to be ultimately, right? I just had it all, but I wasn't the person I wanted to be, bottom line. So I just walked into work one day and I quit. And then everybody said, you're crazy. My parents looked at me and said, what are you doing? Like, this is, you had a golden opportunity. You had everything carved out for you. And it was tough, because I can tell you, about 2 weeks after I did that, at first I felt liberated, because I was like, yeah, you know what? I gave them the royal two fingers and I walked out of there. And then I said, oh crap, like, what am I doing? Because I left. People weren't happy that I left. Word got out quick. People actually thought I got fired. Yeah. They're like, what did you do? Why did you get, what happened? It was just, and I said, well, it was my free choice. I just got lucky enough, I would say, and I'm a firm believer in destiny, doing what you're meant to do, having a purpose in life. And then all roads kind of led to this path through, I was coaching entrepreneurs on the side as an executive. And it's something I love to do. I love helping people. I love helping people break through their roadblocks. I love when people say, I got it. Now I can actually go and implement this, and it makes a difference in their life. And so I just continued down the path and said, why don't I just see if this works full time? And one door led to another. It's not that I didn't have hiccups, but I just started coaching entrepreneurs. And then I realized that entrepreneurs didn't need help with the business strategies and tactics. They did, but that was secondary. It was really their, what I call the self-mastery skills, aligning their mindset with their emotions and their energy. And that was 80% of the work that I was doing. And I was surprised because everything was pushing me towards business coaching and the traditional business coaching.
Sure.
Hey guys, this is how you build your marketing. This is how you build your sales. This is how you build your operations. This is your human resources plan. That's how you grow your business, right? And we'll talk about finances, all that kind of stuff. But then it just kept pushing me towards, no, you got to help these people further, deeper. They're having relationship challenges. These people are actually depressed, right? And we think a lot of entrepreneurs live a happy life. In reality, no, they don't. You're absolutely right, Curt. They suffer the most because they put everything on the line. They're not getting that constant paycheck, right? They're mortgaging their homes. They're mortgaging everything to put into their business. And a lot of times the entrepreneurs that are, have the money, they've gotten to that point, they're taking vacations and they have a successful lifestyle. But the ones that haven't reached that point are sacrificing all those things. And so people, I realized, are just not as happy as they should have been. And I realized specifically with men that they were having a tough time. And it just so happened that as a result of a breakup with my high school sweetheart, I was absolutely in love with her. We were together for 7, 8, actually it was 9 years that we were together. And when we broke up, I was devastated. I went into depression. I went into hardcore. I was even contemplating, do I even want to continue to live?
Wow.
At that moment, I actually made a decision. I said, I want to know everything about relationships that I can. What makes men tick? What makes women tick? Because I do not want to go into another failed relationship. And I want to know what I did wrong. And so I started studying psychology. I started studying the psychology of women and psychology of men and relationships. And that led to leadership psychology, performance psychology, neuroscience, mindfulness. And so that's kind of been my passion on the side. And all of that is what I help entrepreneurs with today. Because most men, let's just say in their relationships, are not happy. I'm being completely honest. Most men are not. I just got off the call with a woman that's in we have a local business group here that we just talked about business. And then she started talking about her relationship. And I got into her about how men work and how women work. And I spent an hour and a half on the phone with her about her relationship because she wasn't in a happy relationship. So we have this persona that entrepreneurs live a great life, but a lot of them really don't. And so that's my personal mission, is to help men. And then on top of that, we have another dynamic, which is this whole toxic masculinity.
Sure. And
telling men that it's not healthy to be masculine. And it's right beneath the surface right now. And we have certain politicians and certain, powerful positions that are a representation of what's happening, that men are fed up and they don't like this. And then they respond in what I call not a very mindful way. And they have very poor leadership skills. And so men are questioning themselves. A lot of men are questioning themselves in terms of, am I supposed to be a man? Am I supposed to act like this? Am I not supposed to act like this? How am I supposed to interact with my wife? Am I being too controlling, right? Am I being controlling at all? Am I being a man or am I not being a man? And they have all of these questions here. It's almost like men have forgotten how to be men. And that's impacting how they run their business, how they are in their relationship with their spouse, and ultimately how they're raising children. And so I'm seeing this impact. And this actually started, Curt, when I started studying relationships. Some of the top relationship experts in the US were telling me about the trends. And they said, Purdeep, watch the trends that are happening in society. And I said, this sounds silly. And I slowly started to watch it happen. And now it's actually happening where there's more. And you talk about this, Curt, which is absolutely amazing. And I think you absolutely should, is about depression and anxiety and suicide. Because there is an epidemic out there. People are just not as happy as they used to be. Life isn't as simple as it used to be. And people are suffering. So my ultimate passion in life is to help men. And especially since my father passed last year.
I'm sorry about that.
Yeah, thanks. It was tragic. He passed from a heart attack. He passed working. He was by himself. Him and my mom actually had some interesting conversations the night before he passed. You could call it an argument. My mom didn't talk to him in the morning. She actually went to the temple for Sunday morning prayer. And normally she would take my dad. She didn't have a conversation. My dad continued to work. He passed away working. My mom came home from the temple, and she actually was working on the orchard too. She was working 10 feet away from my dad for an hour.
Oh, wow. And didn't know.
And didn't know. And there's so many what ifs. There's so many, what if I had just had said this? What if I had got him to go to the temple with me? What if I had just said good morning? What if, just so many what ifs.
Sure.
But he was meant to go at that time. But my dad also faced challenges as an entrepreneur. So this is my passion, because my dad, his goal was to hit 65 and not retire. He would always continue to work. We still have a family business, but it was that moment for him that would have been, I made it. I gave my family whatever they needed. I built a life for them. Now I can relax and I can enjoy, right? It's that milestone for him. He was 64 and a half when he passed away. And so I do not want to see any other man suffer. I do not want to see entrepreneurs suffer. I don't want to see their children, their family suffer. So that's where I'm kind of leading from.
That's excellent. And a lot of people I run across, I'm on a mission to banish the term work-life balance from our lexicon, because what a lot of entrepreneurs and executives alike, what they think of work-life balance is, well, I'm working on this project for the next 2 weeks. I got to put my head down. I'm going to work late. I'm going to ignore my wife or husband, significant other, whatever, and my kids. I'm not going to work out. But when that 2 weeks is over, then I'll come home early and then we'll go out for a date. And the 2 weeks turns into months, turns into when I'm 65. And you are not the first person. I mean, just in my family, the people who were on that 65 plan of we'll enjoy life at 65, just in my family, heart attack, stroke, cancer, knee replacement, and to either them or their spouse. And, they spent life waiting in many cases where, time is, a lot of people think money is not renewable. Whether you want to believe it or not, money is 100% renewable. It's not easy to get, right? But it's renewable. Yeah. Time, you cannot have time back. And you don't want to have a life of regret. Absolutely. And, so, on that note, on the work-life balance, and I like to talk about alignment between your work, your family, yourself. And you, going back to what you mentioned when you were in the corporate world, and there were some things going on within the office and around the table that you didn't like. At the same time, you were on the verge of divorce. What was the linkage between the two?
Oh, yeah, great question. So the linkage was, I just wasn't being the man that I wanted to be. I wasn't authentic to myself. I wasn't living the life that I wanted to live. I was living the life that other people wanted me to live, that I thought other people wanted me to live, and that society is teaching people how to live, because we're all meant to say, be successful, have a great paying job or entrepreneur, have this big house, drive fancy vehicles, right? And look a certain way, dress a certain way, and be a certain way. And I had literally lost myself as a man, as a person, as a human being. I lost my identity, you could say. Even when I came out of it, Curt, this is being in the coaching space and in the influencer space, you need to be aligned with your identity. And you have to be aligned with the message that you have. And even me at that point, having all the knowledge when it comes to the psychology and the neuroscience behind it, I wasn't even aligned at that point. I wasn't living to my own game. I came out and I can tell you, I had the tough people would say, you know what, you should do interviews, you should do podcasts, you should do videos, make videos. At that time, I said, honestly, I don't even know what to say. I got all this knowledge, but I don't even know. It's not even what to say. It's how to say it, because I lost my sense of who I was. In the corporate world, I was groomed to be a professional. Suit, tie, speak a certain way. You don't say certain things. Don't swear, right? I literally lost all sense of who I was. So I came out and I had to rebuild myself, which wasn't easy.
Yeah, it's I have an accelerator that I do called Your Purpose is Your Brand, which speaks to that in terms of if you don't have that clear sense of who you are, then and you can tell people, you watch the videos, you watch whatever, and you're like, that person is full of it because they have no idea who they are as a person. And you can tell, you watch them over time and they kind of shift from week to week, and a lot of people are like that, right? Because they've lost their sense of self. Either it was stripped out of them by school, by parents, sometimes by a job, or all three combined. And so at some point, it's almost like they've outsourced not only their sense of self, but their opinions, their beliefs, their values to, well, what do the majority of my Facebook friends say? What does my boss want me to be? What does my whoever want me to be? And it's dangerous.
No, and especially with social media. I'm a firm believer. I'm not going to post pictures of my house. I have them in some of my videos, motivational videos, but I don't constantly post pictures of my house or my vehicles or anything like that, because I don't think that's healthy. As much as people think that it's motivational, I don't think it is, because as much as people do get motivated, there's a lot of people out there that aren't in that space and don't have the means at this point to get to that level. Yes, it may motivate them, but what it's doing to a lot of people as well. And I say this to my wife, I say, if we're going to post anything on social media, let's be purposeful for it. Let's make sure that it moves people forward in some particular way. And so this whole thing about living to a specific standard of being a certain way is just being exponentially added or grown by social media. And so it's not healthy. And I know that the rates of depression, as you mentioned, are increasing per generation. Anxiety, mental health disorders, all of this stuff, they're linking it to technology as well. So I think, and this is my personal opinion, Curt, and I'm not one of those doom and gloom guys. I'm very optimistic, but I think we're in the perfect storm right now because we have some powerful people in some positions. I'm not going to get political, but that are causing some worldwide uproars. We have this challenge with the Me Too movement and toxic masculinity. There's a butting of heads right now between, I'm not going to say at the local level, but at a grander scheme of things between
Sure.
the men and women. And then we have, all of these world issues. We have the climate change that's happening. We have, all of these things that are happening all at once. And I'm a firm believer that over the next 10 decades or 10 years, we as a human species, we're going to have to figure out whether we want to live on this planet or not.
Yeah.
Right. We're going to have to come together in some way, shape, or form and say, let's band together. Let's work together. Let's actually help each other grow, because we can. With the technology out there, you said something before, which is entrepreneurs make change, right? We grow the economy. We do things to benefit the world. Absolutely. There's so many things out there that we could take advantage of to help people, to feed people, to do things and move forward. Now we're getting into the philosophical realm, Curt, and we could take this in any different direction. But it's like, where do we start? What do we do?
And I agree. And I think that, if you look at some of the threats that have hit humanity and the earth in history, I hear 75,000 years ago or something, Mount Toba, which is Lake Toba is now there in Sumatra, right? There was a massive volcanic eruption that some people thought, some researchers think, caused a massive, cloud for thousands of years and reduced the human population to a few thousand, I think under 10,000.
Yeah, wow.
And, that was not man-made, right? There was nothing that any of the men did, humans did, to anger the mountain. They probably thought there was, right? Yeah. Maybe they spent their time saying, let's anger the mountain less. Let's just not mess with the mountain. And you can't reverse time, right? You can't reverse the spin of the earth. And you apply that to today, and I'm not going to get political on climate change, people who are very, versus climate change deniers, right? I'm not going to get into that. But what I do know is you look at someplace like, Holland, I'm probably saying this wrong. They have massive flooding. And instead of cursing the heavens and saying we're angering the world, they brought technology to bear, probably brought some entrepreneurs in, and they don't flood anymore.
Yeah.
Here in Charleston, we have flooding. Now, they built an entire city on landfill. So whether or not it's because we've done things, when you build a city on landfill, on an ocean, maybe there's going to be flooding. But they're spending all this money to lobby for changes in greenhouse gas emissions, et cetera. Where you're a city, maybe let's bring entrepreneurial things to view. And I think a lot of debates that are happening are to raise money on both sides. Mm-hmm. And it's like, you know, if a Mount Toba was going to happen today, we have the ingenuity to, we're not going to stop it, but we can deal with it so we don't have a massive loss of life. But I feel like we're too busy arguing about it's going to erupt. Well, you're a climate change environmentalist. Well, it's not going to erupt. You're just a right-wing whatever. And it's like, in the meantime, you got the Elon Musks of the world, the Steve Jobs of the world. They're just going to go change the world. And so it's you mentioned about banding together. It's banding together, but also realizing the strength of the individual and entrepreneurs and allowing our superheroes to be superheroes to help save us all, if that makes sense.
Oh yeah, absolutely. No, I totally agree, because the people that are going to do something are going to do something. They're the ones that are on a mission. They're the ones that are actually purposeful in getting the stuff done. And I think we have to thank them. So you're absolutely right. I think we need those people. I think we need more people to come out and actually express their superpowers and actually be those visionaries. Absolutely.
So on the topic of men, I feel like there's a middle ground that many people miss. You know, nuance in our current society is thrown out because you have to take a side, right? And even the issue of men, I don't even say toxic masculinity, just men is now a political issue.
Yeah.
And there are some people who think all men are guilty, and that when one person is prosecuted or persecuted unjustly, or maybe not justly, I've actually seen arguments that said, well, he's just paying for the sins of all men. I feel like, you know, you mentioned suicide, and 7 in 10 suicides in the United States are men. They happen to be white men, but men 45 to 54. These are people who are not under the definition of privileged, right? Maybe they were privileged. They fall into the definition of privilege. Not all white men grew up with money, right? But the number 2, by the way, it's not even close, are like 85-year-old men. And it's interesting because I feel like there's this middle ground of, there's the John Wayne, I'm the strong, silent type, right? And there's that model. And then on the other side, there's the effeminate male, right? The opposite of the alpha male. And I've seen some debates where, well, can't you have a little of both? Where you are strong, you're truly tough. Tough meaning, you know, you put your head down and you're tough on the right things, right? But you're not afraid to ask for help, because I think rates of depression amongst women are higher, but the suicide rate is much higher amongst men because women go seek help and men do not. And they think they have to be tough, but there's a difference between tough and stupid, right? You go and you work out through, you know, there's working out through pain, through discomfort, and there's working out when you know you just tore your ACL and you're doing permanent damage to your leg. There's a middle ground here that I think doesn't get discussed a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's what we got. So, you know, this is, I talk a lot about the energies that are both masculine and feminine energies. Both men and women have both energies in them. And so it's like the yin and the yang. So every man has a masculine force in them and has a feminine force. Otherwise, you would be eating your children if you didn't have any feminine force, right? You wouldn't want to love. You wouldn't be connected. You wouldn't even have creativity, because the feminine force is creative. It's flowing. It likes variety, right? And it loves connection. That's what it's all about. The masculine force is very goal-oriented. It's very driven. It's very solid. It's very peaceful. And in a lot of ways, it's actually very monotonous and very boring, because all it does is focus on a task to get it done. So you have to have a balance in between to be successful. Now, heterosexual men have more masculine force in them, and heterosexual women have more feminine in them. And that's how relationships are actually built too, between a man and a woman. Now, I'm going to say man and a woman, but you can talk about a man and a man, because one man will have more masculine energy than the other man in those relationships. But there has to be an attraction. There has to be what they call polarity. And so, yes, as men, we need to understand, just like there's different leadership styles out there. People say, be a leader. Well, there's actually dozens and dozens of leadership styles. And the simplest way to put it is situational leadership, which is being able to switch from a particular type of leadership to a different type of leadership, depending on which situation you're in and who you're dealing with. The same goes with being a man or even being a woman, because a man has to realize that, let's just say you're owning a business, that if you're in a business meeting and you're about getting results, you're talking about year-end numbers and or whatever it is, strategic planning, you may have to put on more of your masculine side because you're driving your team. But if you're sitting and you're actually trying to motivate your staff and make connection, that's when you have to put on more of your feminine force. I'm not going to say you have to be feminine. There's a difference between a feminine force and being feminine. I just want to make that clear. Feminine, you just connect more, right? And you can do that as a man. So that is important for men to realize. And what ends up happening is most people don't understand this. Most people haven't been given the awareness of this. So they don't understand the masculine and the feminine force and how they actually work. Just educating people will make them understand. Yes, men feel like they can't express themselves. Firstly, because their brains are built differently. Women's brains are actually built to actually connect the right hemisphere to the left hemisphere. Their emotional brain to their actually thinking brain. There's actually the corpus callosum in between, which is thicker, which means that they connect more. Men don't have that same thickness. So we don't connect our emotions to that same level. So there's a genetic predisposition to not be in tune with our feelings as much. And then forget about feelings. Women are grown up to talk about feelings since they were kids, since they were girls. Boys are not developed that way. Boys do not talk about feelings as they grow up. So they continue to go down that path. That is the biggest challenge I face. And I can tell you honestly that is one of the challenges I face in coaching men, because men will come in and they will talk about growing their business. But I have to break through their shell and make them realize that they're not growing their business because they have an emotional roadblock there somewhere. And it's not even just mindset, because mindset is built on your emotions. Everything that we do is built on emotions. And if you realize that, there's studies to prove this, that all your decisions are mainly built on the emotions. Your habits are built on your emotions. All of the stuff that you do is built on emotions. Then men their ears start to perk up and they say, okay, well, tell me more about it. If I'm not more emotional, that's not what I mean. I don't mean you sit there and you cry for, when you watch a sad movie or you're bawling your eyes out with your wife, but being in tune with your emotions is absolutely critical. Speaking to someone about your emotions, whether it's your coach or even your wife, I highly recommend that, even with your wife, because a lot of guys don't talk to their wife about their emotions and how they're feeling, whether they're feeling down. But that will actually connect your wife to you that much even stronger. And she will actually think of you as a more holistic man. And you probably have better sex as a result, right? So there's a lot of other benefits from that as well. And I know I'm kind of dragging this on, but there's so much I could say about this. But yes, men need to be more in tune with their feelings to have better businesses, have better relationships, be more successful. And if you want a powerful man, and this is what I teach, this is what I show, so I know this. You want a powerful man? That man needs to be in tune with his emotions. He needs to know how to use his emotions in what situation. Because when I was at Stanford, they were doing, and they continue to do these studies, is the implications of emotions on decisions. And the more emotions you put behind your decisions, the more committed you are, the more passionate you are, and the more effective you are in taking that action. So that is something to realize. Don't just make a decision and say, I'm going to do this. Say, I'm going to do this. Put every single emotion you can to drive yourself in that direction. Because when push comes to shove, when someone's going to throw you off track, which they will, your emotions are what perpetuate you to move forward.
It's as you were talking about, powerful men really understand and get in touch with their emotions and can harness them for lack of a better term, maybe not control them, but harness them.
Yeah.
I was thinking about I'm a big superhero nerd, the story arc of Bruce Banner and the Hulk in the Marvel movies. And it comes to the end, in Endgame, where as Bruce Banner, he was smart, but he couldn't really do much to save the world. He had to turn to the Hulk, and he hated it. As the Hulk, he destroyed too much stuff. In Endgame, he becomes Professor Hulk, where he's the best of both worlds, where he's smart enough, he's kind of harnessed them. And it's almost, you don't want to say become the Hulk, but become Professor Hulk, right, as a man, because when you need to smash, you're going to smash. When you need to be the smart listener, you can do that. And I think that as by this very fact, you're combining the best of both worlds. It's nuanced, more nuanced versus the people who say smash or don't smash.
Yeah.
We're in the middle.
Yeah. I'm so glad you brought up that analogy, because that is such an awesome analogy. I didn't even pick up on that, but you're absolutely right. And so this is what I talk about, is the inner force that we all have. You can play it off of Star Wars, but there's a reason why we talk about every human being. I'm going to talk about from a spirituality perspective, has a driving force inside of them. You can actually measure your energy levels in your frequency as a human being. There's actually Russian research and scientists that are actually proven this. Now, the United States is bringing some of that technology in. It's not used to the degree that it's used in Russia. For example, they will use it before they do surgeries, for example, because they want to see where your frequency is at. And if you're aligned in that frequency, if you're a peak at that frequency, they will actually operate, because you have a higher chance of actually making it through. Wow. If your frequency is lower, it's not at that level, they will say, we will not operate today. So it's absolutely critical. People have to understand everything that you do is based off of energy. People talk about time being your most valuable resource. It's energy, because you can have all the time in the world. If you don't have the energy to be effective, you will not be successful. So energy is critical. And so by aligning your thoughts, because most men or even women want to be successful, they say, I will be successful. People even do affirmations and say, I am successful, I am powerful, I am successful, I'm powerful. But what they're not doing is they're not bringing their emotions to that level. So you have your mind thinking one thing, and your body is actually not aligning from a frequency standpoint. And so there's actually two different frequencies between your mind and your heart. And there's studies done, and your heart actually has a frequency. It's called the heart variability. And in most cases, most people are not sync. They're not sync. Their brain waves and their heart waves are actually off kilter. They're offline. But you can actually go into and actually sync those up. And when you sync those up, you actually are at a different level. And people will do this through traditional mindfulness exercises and meditation. That's why I teach mindfulness as a core component of the work that I do. Because when you sync that up, you are at a level of being able to think beyond what you can think. You can problem solve beyond what you can normally problem solve. People talk about flow state, for example. I know you teach the flow state, right? That's when you're in that peak genius state, when you're actually powerful beyond belief. That is your inner force. You have to align your thoughts, your emotions, and your energy. When you get to that level, boy, I'm telling you, you can create things that you never thought possible. If you're not aligned, which most people are not. So there's three elements: your thoughts, your energy, and your emotions are off by at least one of those, if not two of those factors.
Interesting. Wow.
Yeah. And so most men, most women, we live through that. We live our entire lives that way. And then we wonder why we're not happy, why we're not getting stuff done, why we're continue. People, this is one thing, and I'm on board. I just did a video on this today. We talk about perseverance, and especially as men, let's, blast through our challenges, persevere. But there's a point where you actually have to sit back and say, it's not working. I have to rebuild it. I have to ground myself. I have to sit and think, what different angles can I take, or what different paths do I have to go down? Because this is not working. What ends up happening is most people continue to do the same thing and use up their energy. So it's opportunity cost. If you use your energy trying to overcome this one challenge over and over and over and over and over again, and here's where I see it the most with people, Curt, is in their relationships. They will do the same darn cycle over and over again and use the same amount of energy trying to overcome the same challenges, that they fall into that nasty cycle, and then they wonder why they don't have energy for their business, or why they don't have energy for their kids.
It's yeah, I get that. I get that question. Actually, someone in one of my accelerators asked me recently, how do you know when to stop or to quit on something? And it's hard because we're taught finish what you start, have some stick to itiveness, and yes, it's interesting to explain. It's like, yes, but you got to make sure you're doing the right thing. And like you said, having those right inputs that give you the energy to get the right thing done. Because often, you do the same 5 things that everyone's done and it doesn't work. And then you're like, I'm a failure, but I'm going to keep investing in it. Right. Because, so that sunk cost, right? You go to a movie and 20 minutes into it, the movie is the worst movie you've ever seen, but you're like, well, I already paid the $12 or $20. I drove here. I bought the popcorn. So I guess I'd better waste the next 2.5 hours of my life. You apply that, a lot of people, to their lives. You mentioned mindfulness, and I don't want you to give up your secret sauce here, but
I'm good.
You have someone that you're working with and their frequencies are off and their energy is low. Where do you start with someone like that?
Yeah, first of all, so there's 3 points, and I'm more than happy to share this because I think more and more people, this is about helping people. So the first thing is understanding that you can only have energy in this moment right now. So I will say, and I will take a look and say the first thing, so the first point, let's just say, is to realize that you have to live in the here and now. That's the only time where you can live. And more importantly, that's the only time where you have an impact and energy. You cannot influence your future in the future. So constantly thinking about your future is draining your energy from today. Thinking about your past all the time, the mistakes that you made, it's constantly draining your energy from today. So yes, take a look at your past mistakes, learn from them, apply the learnings. Take a look and be strategic about your future, have strategic sessions. But outside of that, you have to reduce your worrying. You have to reduce the amount of times you put yourself in the future because you can only have impact today. Here's a prime example. Can you hit a baseball tomorrow? Can you hit a baseball yesterday? Can you hit a baseball this afternoon? You cannot. There's no physical possible way you cannot. This is proven by quantum physics. The future and the past do not exist. The only place they exist is in our head. So realize that. So if you really truly grasp that piece, that is massively powerful for people. And I know for entrepreneurs, they miss out on this the most because they are with their family thinking about work. They are at work thinking about how they're being a bad father or a husband or a mother because they're not spending enough time with their family. It's constantly not being in the here and now. And again, technology is great. Social media is great, but it's also taking us away from the present here and now, what's in front of us. So that's number one. The second piece is what I call focus and unfocus. So it's a difference between, here's an analogy that I can use. Simplest way to use it is most people live like an octopus with their tentacles in so many different areas. What ends up happening is you don't have the same level of impact that you have. You dilute your energy. You dilute your impact just by thinking about so many different things. Concept of multitasking, it's BS. I can prove it with science over and over again. I've studied it. It doesn't work. The only time you can multitask is if you have a task that's programmed into your memory system, which is things like tying your shoe, even driving you can do to a certain extent, going for runs, going for a walk. Those are things that you don't have to really think about. But if you're sitting there, you're doing an email, you're looking at your phone, it takes you 9 times longer to actually recoup your energy levels to that same degree, that same focus. So focus on what's in front of you. And Curt, I know, again, you talk about this, you preach about this, is impact, right? Or outcomes and being intentional. And whatever you're going to do, focus on that task. That is so important. I second that, absolutely. Because that focus, you need to carve out that time and put all other distractions aside and focus on that. The other concept is unfocus. So this whole concept of being mindful and meditating, I'm a firm believer because I've seen the impacts that it's had on people. I've seen people with depression and anxiety that have come out of it just through meditation alone. Research has shown 12 minutes of meditation a day will reduce your anxiety, will reduce your stress levels, will increase your antibodies, your hormones, your positive hormones in your body for it to actually heal. So here's how most people live their lives. Our thoughts are like balloons, like helium balloons. And what you have to do at some point in time, you have to cut the straps. You have to cut them off and just let them go. And just let them go and not have them in your head anymore. Because when you do, you will experience a state of bliss, a state of peace. So there's 3 universal emotions that most people do not feel, that you can feel through meditation and mindfulness, which are joy, inner peace, right? And love. Those are 3 those are emotions of the universe. You can reach those through mindfulness and meditation. When you do that, you become that much more powerful in your life. When you meditate, when you come out of a meditation, you can go from crappy days, like absolute crappy. I've done this. I've lost a ton of money, gone into a state of meditation and come out and said, okay, what are we going to do now? Right? So that's the second component. The third component is understanding the masculine and the feminine force. Those are components because you have to understand there's a balance in there. And some men will have more feminine force in them. Some men will have more masculine. But you have to be authentic with yourself. You cannot be a man that has more masculine force and not live it out. You cannot be a woman that has more feminine force and not live it out. I'll give you a prime example. My wife, if you ever meet her, and hopefully one day you will, is, she is such a feminine woman. And she has this pressure. She's very educated. She has multiple masters. She's a nurse practitioner. And she has this, she wants to be a housewife at some point, but she feels this pressure that she can't, that it's looked down upon, and that she has to be a strong, independent woman, which is a masculine force, right? That's a very masculine force, is independence. And she's been taught to be that way. And we've had to work through it to put her back into her natural state. And now she is happier. She is more loving. She is more free. We have a better relationship because of that. So understanding the balance between the 2 forces, the masculine and the feminine, and being authentic is what's going to create more energy for you in your life and be more mindful. So those are the 3 components of mindfulness.
That's awesome. And I love that. My wife has a master's degree, and, we homeschool our 4 kids, and other people have made comments, oh, you're just wasting all that money that you put into the master's degree. And, it is a pressure, and, but she loves being a mom. She loves educating our children. She loves doing all that, but there is that push and pull that we all have, right? In terms of external pressures and expectations, external of either family, friends, or society. What do you, real quick on meditation? I have tried meditation, and I find that I get more stressed when I try to meditate. This is just a personal aside. People listening are probably like, what a weirdo. But like, for instance, when they put the blood pressure cuff on me, it's just my left arm, by the way. Yeah. I start to feel my heartbeat, and it drives me crazy. Like my heart rate goes up. There are certain things like that. And we were meditating once. I was in a session, and she said, feel your heartbeat, hear your heartbeat. And oh my gosh, I had to leave the room. And so when I try to meditate, I find my mind spins more. But if I go for a walk, my mind shuts down. Does meditation does that not count? Does the walk not count as real meditation?
No, walking meditation is a form of meditation. Okay. And that's something that's critical as well. Anything that you can really get out of yourself to actually experience a state where you're actually letting go of your thoughts, where you're not constantly thinking, is the most important thing. So meditation and mindfulness there's a fine line, and there's a little bit of a difference. Traditional mindfulness will be, okay, feel what's around you, take deeper breaths. There's, feel your heartbeat, feel all that kind of stuff. And then you go into a state of meditation, right? That is the goal. I would highly recommend trying to do traditional, because you're not the only one, Curt. My wife was like that. She was like that probably for the first 6 months. And I kept pushing her. I said, do it, do it, do it. One day you will have a breakthrough. She's had the breakthrough. And she's actually gotten to the level where my wife used to be a high anxiety person. She's no longer that level of anxiety. She still has a little bit, but it's not even nearly as close as it used to be. What I find is most people that try that, it's because they put pressure on themselves to try to do it properly, they're forcefully trying to do it. But I can promise you, if you continue to do it and just do it for a few minutes and then increase the time over and continue to do it, you will have a breakthrough at some point in time. And I can tell you, the moment that you have the breakthrough, because I went through this myself, right? I went through this myself. I just happened to do it a while ago, is you will feel the state of bliss, this inner peace, that you are going to be like, oh my God, like this is something I have not felt before. And I can't even explain it's like all the weight off your shoulders has been lifted. It's like being completely free. It's like being yourself. That's what it feels like. It is so, I could say it's so powerful, because you will come out of there and you will want it that much more. You will go into your next meditation saying, I want to get to that state again. So try it.
Yeah.
You will get there eventually.
Well, Purdeep, I want to thank you so much for coming on the show today. And there's people listening, men listening, male entrepreneurs, and they're like, man, I gotta find out more about Purdeep, and I want to work with him. I want to listen to his podcast. Where should they go?
Yeah, simply, you can find my podcast and at the malepodcast.com. Sorry, I should say malepodcast.com. And the website is simply themaileentrepreneur.com. And I'm more than happy. I love helping people. So if you want to reach out, you can contact me directly just through the form, and I'll respond personally.
Awesome. Well, Purdeep, thanks so much. We'll put all those links in the show notes. I appreciate you coming on the podcast.
Yeah, thanks, Curt. Same here, man. I appreciate the opportunity to be here. So thank you.
Thank you.